Satnam, yogis and yoginis, hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to introduce a new topic, a new course that I'm launching. I started recording some videos for that course in the last satsangs that we were having last week, and I already cut them and put them in the channel as the one video on the levels of consciousness and another video on the three personal minds, the negative, the positive, and the neutral. But my idea was to do this as part of a big course, a larger course on the mind. So today I'm gonna talk a little bit about this course, and of course I am live right now. So if anybody's live, you can say hello. And if you're watching the recording, then you are welcome to join us live when I'm doing the streams. And you can ask any question, or you can just share your story or share what you feel about what I'm saying, and we can talk about this. So the mind, we're going to talk about the mind, and we're going to approach it the way I generally do it, which is combining a Western scientific perspective on what the mind is and an Eastern yogic perspective on what the mind is. And we will see how they meet together and how both dimensions both can help us to see it in a more holistic way, in a more complete way, and it may help us in a number of ways to understand some things that are happening, and maybe we don't understand why is that happening, or even if I understand how it's happening, how can I change that? So the idea to have this double perspective can help us find the middle ground, living in between these two worlds, the Eastern and the Western. And this mind course, my idea is that we're going to cover many different aspects which are connected to the mind. And that would be like, for example, we're going to talk about the hardware. That would be the brain, yeah? The brain would be like the hardware in a computer, and the software would be the mind that runs on top of that hardware. And then what is the ego in connection to that mind? And then what is the consciousness with all that? Yeah? So we are going to talk about this in quite a lot of detail throughout the next following satsangs and the following videos that I'm going to be doing. And today let me just introduce a little bit about how does it refer from a point of view of yoga. When we talk about the mind, we have to come from a perspective of consciousness. We have to start from consciousness. Satnam, Willie Hauser, welcome to the channel. Hello, I'm glad that you are here joining us. Feel free to say anything that you want in relation to what I'm talking about. How is your relationship to your mind? Are you out of your mind? Don't mind, never mind the mind. You know, these kind of things. So the thing is, from a scientific perspective, on the Western perspective, we come bottom up, meaning we go first into the hardware, the brain, and then we study how does the brain allow for the emergence of mind. And then as the mind is developing, how is it that the ego starts to form, and how the mind and the ego are giving rise to what we say consciousness. And from a perspective which is scientific, we don't even know what that is, because what is consciousness and how can we measure it? How can we say when does it appear and what is it not? That's a challenging thing. But yes, from a perspective of the Eastern philosophy, we are going top down. Rather than going from the brain towards consciousness, we go from consciousness towards the brain. So Willie says, I'm only out of my mind. That's the thing. That's the only way I figured it out how to do it, which is during the streaming. But anyway, let's go back. So from the point of view of the Western, we go bottom up. From the point of view of the Eastern, we go top down, top bottom. So we come from consciousness and how is the mind appearing. And so let's think about this for a moment. Let's think about consciousness. So as we come into this planet, we come as consciousness, we are consciousness, but consciousness is conscious of something. Greetings, Andrechetta. Hello, welcome. Satnam. Oh, your message appears on the screen now. Okay, I thought I lost the chat, but now it appears. So maybe I did something strange. It appears very small, but I'm not going to touch it. I'm scared to touch it now. I'll figure it out. But yeah, greetings, Satnam. We're doing a course on the mind. We are starting today. Yeah, we have a few videos already, but today's the introduction. So consciousness means conscious of something. And by definition, because we're aware of something, magic, yeah, Satnam. Because we are aware of something, we cannot be aware of everything at the same time. Consciousness is something that is selective. So when we are babies, and as we come into the body, the spirit is coming down, let's say, the consciousness of the baby is, first of all, what's happening. This is a whole new experience. And so first of all, maybe it feels like there is some sort of strange movement and like waves and a storm happening inside. And the baby still doesn't know it, but this is just hunger. But it feels something very weird, so it's uncomfortable, and the awareness of the baby is just something is weird, and then it cries. And then that attracts the attention of the mother gives milk, and now I am calm. Now there's something really uncomfortable and nasty and wet and itchy, and it's just poo. It's just a nappy, which needs cleansing, changing. So cries again, and the mother pays attention to that and changes, no? So the consciousness at first is paying attention to what is wrong. Because if I am hungry, or if I am dirty, or if something is wrong, and I feel pain, then I am in danger. Yeah. So the very first priority of a baby, and actually of any human being, is survival. And therefore, the baby's consciousness, in the most basic state, it already paying attention. Is my survival needs covered? Am I hungry? Am I dirty? Am I sleepy? Do I need to sleep? Is this covered or not? And if this is covered, when the baby is clean and fed and rested, now I am available, right? So now the consciousness starts to say, okay, what do I have around me? And starts to pay attention to the outside. Yeah, it was going in, now it's going outside. And in the outside, it goes with this curiosity to see the world, and it starts to take the things, and it wants to play, it wants to learn. Yeah, for babies, playing and learning is so very much connected. And for adults as well, but we forget about it, and we try to learn without playing, and that's how it's very difficult to learn when we are not having fun. But more about this later. At the moment, we are babies, and the baby is trying to learn. And so baby is having an interaction with the toys around them and with the adults. They are playing with the baby, and now the baby is learning things. And the most basic way that a baby learns is by copying. So the adults in front of the baby are behaving in a particular way and showing the baby how to hold some toys and showing the baby how this little thingy works, pressing a button or things like that. And so the baby is learning by copying them. But what the baby doesn't realize is that by copying, we are mimicking the brain structures in the other one within us. So the way the adults behave and use the things around them, the way they talk to each other, the tone of voice of mommy and daddy and my little brother, all these things, well, older brother in the case of a baby, all these things I'm starting to copying in my brain, and I'm just creating a pattern of how am I going to be in the future. So first, from my consciousness, paying attention to these things, now the mind is starting to develop. And remember, the first thing that we were paying attention is everything well or not? Is my survival at risk or not? So the very first expression in life is one of polarity. It's already one of polarity when the baby is separated from the mother. Yeah, the very first experience coming to life is just like this separation from the mother. So yes, there is that polarity. The soul being separate from the universal soul, that's another polarity, right? And then now this aspect of, am I well? Am I surviving, or am I in danger? So there is this polarity, this aspect number 2. We will go into numbers more as we advance, but yeah, it's important to start bringing the numbers into this. So, okay, this polarity of something that I like or something that I dislike, because actually if something is uncomfortable, it means that I dislike it. This is the very most primitive form of ego. Yeah, this is the very origins before the ego is actually formed. But ego is an identity that I have created. It's not real, it's false, but I I have created it and I associate with that, and it's an identity based on likes and dislikes. My ego likes a particular kind of things and dislikes a particular kind of things, a particular kind of behaviors, or particular kind of attitudes, or particular things in the world. So I associate with those likes and dislikes, and that's going to be the basis for the ego that is going to be developed later on. So as the mind is developing, especially during the first 3 years and a half, the ego is developing in par with the mind. So they are hand to hand, they are together. And okay, so the consciousness of the baby cannot pay attention to everything because consciousness is limited. Therefore, some things are going to have to be automatic. And that's necessary. That's fine. That's actually something that we need. If we could not automatize behavior and our attention was directed to everything that happens in front of us, imagine you would be like driving in a car and it's raining and the wipers are chung chung and you will be like chung 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 chung. You would be like that all the time, seeing every drop falling. It would be impossible, right? So we need to direct the attention, choose what is the focus of our awareness, and many things are going to be automatized. If we have to think about how I press the pedal to turn the wheel and then change the gear, then we could not operate in the world, having to think about everything. So the brain, as it's copying the other adults in the baby, it's creating automatic systems, which are basically habits, and they will be defining how the baby is later going to operate. Now, these habits and habit patterns, this is like first you make the habit, then the habit makes you. Yeah. When you create the habit, then it's difficult to come out of the habit. That's why it's done. Yeah. The ideal is that we have healthy habits that we can establish and then we can forget about them. If you learn how to drive, that's it. You learn. Now you don't have to think about the pedals anymore. Now it's unconscious. So something that you didn't know how to do before, so you didn't know how to do it. You have to think how to do it, and then that means consciously you have to apply your awareness. Now I understand it, now I do it, now you do it but consciously, and eventually you do it but you don't have to think about this anymore. This is just a regular cycle of learning, how we learn from something that we are incompetent and conscious towards inconscious competent. Let me just do a little explanation of this. So first, we are incompetent. Let's say we don't know how to drive a car, but we don't even know. Yeah? So this is like you may have seen this before. This is consciousness. This is the unconscious, yeah? This is the conscious. This is incompetent. This is competent. So I don't know how to drive, but I don't even know that I don't know how to drive. And then they tell you, well, this is called driving, and someday you're going to learn it. And now, okay, now I don't know how to do it, so I am an incompetent. But now I'm becoming conscious of it. So I don't know how to drive. Yeah, my daughters are asking me, so what is that pedal for? What is this little sign for? Why do you switch that thing when I'm driving? Yeah, so they are wanting to learn. So they know that they don't know how to do it, but they want to learn. Now let's say I sit them in my lap and I start to explain, look, press this button. Oh, do you see the little light? Now you are signaling that you want to turn right. Now she's starting to learn. So as we are learning, so we did this movement from here to here. As we are moving from here to here as we are learning. Yeah, this is becoming aware, something we don't know. This is our learning. Now we can become competent and conscious. So, okay, so now I know if I press this pedal, then I can change the gear, then I release the pedal and I accelerate, and then I slowly move the car forward. And you do it very consciously. The first times you have to think about every movement of the pedal. So this is conscious and competent. And doing this enough times, then you can do it automatically without thinking, which means that you are conscious and competent and conscious, which means that it has become so automatic that you can do it without looking, you can do it without thinking. And that's when it's gone into a part of the brain that is just automatic behavior. And that's good. That's something that is necessary. And the thing is, when you get to that point, this is almost like mastery. Because if you want, you can be aware of this and you can change it. So let's say I can just, a traffic light is red, and I can just slowly go 4th gear to 3rd gear to 2nd gear and then stop, yeah? But if I want, I can consciously say, no, I'm going quite fast, I'm in 4th gear, but suddenly I see it red, okay, so I'm gonna brake and I can go straight into 2nd. I don't have to go through the 3rd. So consciously you can change from the 4th to the 2nd. It's not like when it goes here, you cannot change it anymore. No, you can change it consciously. So when you get to that place, it's almost like mastery. You can control it consciously if you want. Now, this is the general process to learn things for anything in life, yeah? And it's how it's linked to consciousness. But this is how we learn everything, even karmic behavior, even something that goes against us, even something that is not recommended, that's something that is gonna cause pain in some way. So when we see our father or mother or whoever, somebody next to us, behaving in a particular way that is not particularly healthy, something toxic, and we learn that as children, because children are very malleable, then that becomes part of the brain and then becomes automatic behavior. But we haven't really gone through a conscious, mature paying attention of that, but rather it just went like this. It just crossed like this, and we just got it into the brain, and now we are imitating them. This is when children do things that their parents do, and then as we become adults, we think, well, I wish I wasn't like that. I see that my father does the same, and I would like to change that, but I don't know how to know. Maybe my father never opens up emotionally. When he's upset, he always closes down, and I do the same, and I realize that we are doing the same. And yes, it's a male thing, but it's also something that I learned and I would like to change because I never saw my father opening up. How can I change? So this is how we consciously paying attention to something that we want to change, but the mind has a certain automatic rhythm, automatic way of behaving, and that consciousness is trapped there. It's very difficult to change by itself. So what we have is that the ego and the mind, as the brain is developing, as the brain is having its development, this is the brain, it's forming, and then the ego is forming at the same time, and both things, I put a brain but to symbolize the mind, they get entangled, because my likes and my dislikes and the way I operate, they go very much hand in hand, and eventually you don't know the difference between them. So when I hear this inner voice inside of me speaking to me, and I hear that ego there behind, and it's telling me something, and it's hard to recognize, is that coming from the mind or is that coming from the ego? Is that just like a regular process of the mind, or do I have my own take on that, my own angle? I'm going to explore more this in advance in the future parts of this course, but this is just like the introduction. So in a way, the ego and the mind are joined together, and in this joining together, they trapped also consciousness, and consciousness gets trapped. So let's say this is our head. Oops, let me do it like this. And so this ego and the mind are like these two let's do it with two colors. Two things that are intertwined And let's say I say a word, comes out of my mouth. Yeah? Now, where is that word coming from? Well, it's probably a link between the ego and the mind. And even if we want to be conscious, we want to bring our awareness, but consciousness is somehow trapped here. It's trapped in the mind. This is very, very obvious, very, very clear. You experience it the moment you try to meditate. The moment you say, well, let me close my eyes and meditate for a few minutes. And the very first instant, the very moment that you say that, okay, you close your eyes and you are aware, that's time you're awake, fully awake. But then just very, very shortly afterwards, the mind and the ego start to come in and you even forget. So the consciousness gets trapped in between these two waves of the mind and the ego, which are linked like that. And the consciousness gets trapped, we forget, and then we go into this automatic understanding, behavior, whatever thoughts that are coming up. And then we wake up again. Oh, I was supposed to be meditating. What am I doing? Thinking about the emails. No, meditate. So for a moment you have consciousness, and again it's trapped by the mind and the ego. So ego and mind are like this, and they cover consciousness, and we need to separate them, and we need to separate them. So this is a great deal of the work that we do in yoga is this separation, this entanglement of ego and mind, and stop covering the consciousness and allow the consciousness to unfold. So this is a perspective of how consciousness is linked to the ego and the mind. And I mentioned that the Western perspective goes more from the bottom up, from the brain upward. So the brain would be the hardware of the computer, and then the mind is like the result of running the hardware, operating the hardware. That's the software. Yeah. And in this metaphor, it's difficult to tell what would be consciousness. But, a good way we could say is like consciousness is like the electricity, yeah? Because you can have the computer and the brain and the hardware is working perfectly and the software is updated and is up to date and everything is fine. But if the electricity in your house goes off, it just stops working. So sometimes you find a healthy body, a healthy person, a healthy brain, everything is functioning. The person dies, consciousness goes away, there's no electricity, there is no consciousness. The brain, as healthy as it is, and it could work. It has the right nutrients, we have blood, we have everything is working fine, but the consciousness goes away and the brain stops working. So it's the same metaphor. If the electricity stops running through it, we don't operate. There's no operation, there's no brain, there's no mind. But if the electricity is running, the hardware is doing what it has to do, the software is doing what it has to do, we can see in the computer screen the things that are coming up, which means the software is working, so we hear words, we see images. But what is consciousness here? Yeah, it's disappeared within this the illusion, the images that are happening and that we are seeing, the processes of the senses. All this is distracting us from the very fact that we are a conscious being. Yeah, so again, consciousness gets trapped, the electricity is underneath, and it's right there, but you cannot really see it by itself. So this is another metaphor that can help to connect the things. So what are we going to be doing in this course? We're going to be exploring in great detail consciousness, ego, mind, and also many different aspects. From a Western perspective, which is something that I'm going to carry on exploring today, we're going to go into brain, hardware. Let's just start with the hardware. We're going to see the two hemispheres of the brain and one model that is a slightly old model but still very valid, the triune brain. We're going to talk about that, reptilian, mammal, and primate brain and human brain. So the evolution of the brain we're going to see, and the two hemispheres and how they operate. This is going to be very connected also to one of the last videos I was recording on Anuloma Viloma and Nadishodhana on the balancing of the brain. We're going to talk today about well, in the next video, but it's today's live stream. Like, why do we even need to do anuloma viloma? Why would it even be interesting to balance the two hemispheres of the brain? So this is something from the Western perspective, and we're going to see some yogic practices that we can do to help that. So this is what's coming, yeah? The two hemispheres of the brain, and probably maybe tomorrow I'm live streaming again, but if you are just watching this video recorded, then maybe it's already online in the platform, maybe some other day. We will see another day. We will see these layers of the reptilian brain and mammal brain and the primate brain. We will see more about that. So that's about the brain. We're going to see the two hemispheres and the three layers, and then we're going to see more like a yogic perspective. We're going to see a historical understanding, a historical perspective from the times of the Bhagavad Gita up until now. How was the mind understood? Because what we call mind, and we use one word, mind, actually in Sanskrit we have many terms and they are connected in different ways, and we have to slowly undo the puzzle and see the many parts and see how this image of a mind is actually many things. Yeah, in Sanskrit we would call the antarkarana, the inner instrument, and that has like 4 different functions, and we have to slowly, piece by piece, little by little, undo that. Yeah, we're going to see the vision from Vedanta and from Sankhya referring to these 4 aspects, and we're going to see also the levels of consciousness. Now, I already have a video on the 5 levels of consciousness. That would be a video from a more Western perspective. We're going to see how is that connected to the Eastern perspective on the 4 states of consciousness leading to Turiya. Yeah, very famous. The 4th state is called Turiya, even though in the Western perspective we would say there is 5 levels. So I want to relate those. We have a lot of things ahead of us, so that's coming. Seth Cave, Satnam from Seattle area. Hello, welcome to the chat, welcome to the stream. And yes, we are starting today a course on the mind. I'm going to be doing many live streams, and I will put videos in the platform on the mind, understanding the mind from an Eastern and Western perspective. So you arrived just in time. Willie asked, could you please elaborate on the energetic bottom up or head down, the Eastern concept you mentioned in the beginning? What are the differences and advantages of those? Yes. So from a perspective of the West, you are always concerned about what you can measure. So what can you do an experiment that you can take a measurement of? So you can measure electricity in the neurons. You can measure, I don't know, biochemical interactions between the different aspects, different parts of the brain. You can measure secretion of a gland, yeah, a pituitary sending a signal to the brain to the body to do something. So that's something that Western perspective, scientific perspective loves. Something that we can measure, because then we can do experiments. And so coming from there, even just the jump to the mind, because yeah, we accept that there is a mind, but what is the mind and how does it operate? That's not clear at all. So from the Western perspective, we would take, there is a few approaches. There is the approach of neuroscience, which is studying the structures of the brain and seeing how they relate to each other, and how, by the way they operate, gives opportunity for some higher functions to appear. There is the perspective of psychology, which is like, okay, let's just accept there is a mind, and we know there is levels of this mind, and there's subconscious and conscious, subconscious, all that. And so how can we, by asking questions, understand what is underneath, and then by maybe doing some tests, understand, for example, how the memory works, like Piaget's experiments on, how much elements can we hold in our memory. Or you can see by trying to, there's cognitive psychology, or there's many different branches of psychology that is like, how can we affect behavior? How can we change behavior? So that would be going higher. But this is even still How do we go into consciousness? This is like brain, mind, yeah? If the brain is not functioning, then we have to work it out. What is the problem? Is the problem that it needs some medicine? Maybe there is an imbalance in the chemistry of the brain and we need some meds. This is a psychiatric perspective. From a psychological perspective, it's like, well, you're not thinking right. What's wrong with your thinking? Why are you thinking that way? Let's try to fix it. This is kind of like the psychological perspective somehow, kind of, yeah? I'm just being a bit simplistic, but this would be the approach, yeah? Now, looking bottom up is like if the brain structures are not working, if you have an impairment in the biochemistry of the brain, that maybe can cause things like depression, for example. If you look top down, is like, well, if you have you are in an emotional state which is affecting your thoughts, that may also have an impact into your brain. It's actually going to have an impact into your whole body. Yeah, you know, psychosomatic diseases, when we think in a particular way, that has an impact on the body. So there is this relationship between the body, including the brain, and the mind, and how they're going to connect to each other. Now, if my body is in pain and is suffering, that is also going to condition the way I think and the way I feel in my head. Yeah. So actually, both systems are useful, because if the body is unhealthy, the mind is going to be difficult that is healthy. That approach is also in yoga. That's why we do asanas and pranayama, so that later we can meditate. But also, if the mind is unhealthy, that's going to create disease in the body. So let's deal with the mind, and that's the approach in the Yoga Sutras would be the yamas and the niyamas, would be how to deal with having a healthy mind and not creating karma, so that the body is more healthy. So we actually need to approach both. But for example, if we go too much into the bottom up, we may end up trying to find solutions to the symptoms rather than the cause. So for example, if I have problems that are originating from some particular way of thinking, from the Western perspective is, let's have a pill that is going to fix that. While, and I'm not talking psychologists now, but maybe psychiatry, and maybe if it's a psychosomatic disease, it's going to be, let's do something with the disease rather than let's try to have a change of mind. Let's change the way the mind operates. Not even talking about soul or consciousness now, but just about the mind. While if we have an approach top down, we can say, well, you know, that disease is there, but where is that coming from? No? Where is that originating? And can we go to the source? Can we go to the origin? And I believe, you know, Western medicine has improved a lot, and it has evolved a lot, and it's incorporating all these things. Western medicine is relatively new, it's quite new actually. But still, if I go to a hospital with a particular problem, they are not going to ask me what is my diet. They are not going to ask me what are my habits, my sleeping habits. They're going to try to give me a pill to fix it. And that's not always the solution, yeah? And it's actually most of the time just the solution for the temporal symptoms rather than for the origins of many things. However, I always see both sides of the coin. However, yes, an imbalance in the chemistry of the brain is real, that happens, and that can create a particular mental imbalance or even mental disease or even mental illness, psychotic episodes or whatever. So if you have an imbalance in the brain, try to deal with that mind without dealing with the imbalance in the brain. That's going to be really difficult. Somebody who is having a psychotic episode, try to deal with that without dealing with what's wrong underneath in the brain. That's going to be really difficult. So there is value in both approaches. Let's say if you have a pulmonary disease, how is it called? Like, some kind of pulmonary disease, like an infection, don't go to homeopathy. Go to the doctor and get a pill and get antibiotics and deal with that. Afterwards, when you are feeling healthy, then reflect why was this originating? Where was the karma that was associated? How is it that this chakra was this weak? And can I find what is behind all that, and process if there is something to process, and heal if there is something to heal. But the moment that you are having the infection, go and take the pill. Yeah. So there is advantages and disadvantages of just going bottom up or top down. And I think both are necessary, and we have to approach it from both directions. That's why in this channel I try to give the Western and the Eastern perspective, because I think both of them can complement each other very well. And so this is the idea. If we want to deal with our mind, let's talk also about the brain chemistry. Let's talk about the brain hardware that we have, where this mind operates in. I hope this answers you, Willie, but feel free to write more in the chat if you have any further questions to that. So we're going to be studying these things more in detail, in other concepts. We're going to see the historical understanding, yogic understanding of the mind. We're going to see the levels of consciousness from Vedanta and from modern perspective, linking it to the Western perspective. We're going to see how a thought has an effect on us. One thought starts, and then what happens with everything else, how that thought evolves. Yeah. Thank you for the extensive answer. Why I do? Yeah, really, this is why I'm online. If I just wanted to talk about what I was thinking about doing for this course, I would just record a video. I'm online because I'm here to interact with you. So yes, thank you for writing in the chat. That stimulates me into thinking more about this. I mean, I wasn't planning to talk about this, so by you asking makes me reflect upon that, and it evolves. So yeah, I'm growing as I am speaking as well. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Feel free to keep writing. We're going to be talking about this. One thought, what is the effect on us that it has? We're going to talk about what to do with all this. What to do with the mind, with the ego, with the consciousness, and what would be our path as meditators and yogis. Well, the path is very well described by the Yoga Sutras and Samkhya philosophy, Vedanta. We have a journey ahead of us, which is actually a journey in consciousness to go back to the source. Basically, it's like a journey to go back to our source and go back to the light. And we somehow got lost, and we feel separated, and we have to somehow go back to that light. So that's the journey we're going to do, and we're going to use maps to get there. There's some maps on how to get to that light, which we get from these old texts, and it's a lovely thing to have. We are not lost. Thousands, millions of yogis have walked this path before us, and they've been cutting the weeds, and they've been taking off the brambles and opening the path up the mountain. And we just have to recognize this is the path you have to take, and then start walking. So I'm excited to share what I've learned about these things and to walk the path together. So this is the introduction, and we're gonna carry on in the live stream, but for those who watch, I will cut this bit as a video. So if you are just watching this bit as the introduction to the course, welcome and thank you very much, and carry on with the next video, which will be on the hardware of the brain. So thank you for the introduction. Till tomorrow, if you come, or until next time. Sanam.